Welcome back to Birds of a Feather Talk Together. We're finishing up the spooky season with another spooky bird, the raven. We've done a little bit of a Halloween theme this month with our bloodsucker episode, the shoebill episode, and now we'll close out the month talking about ravens. Edgar Allan Poe made ravens famous and associated them with evil and representing death, but they also happen to be one of the most intelligent and interesting birds around. They actually impersonate other bird calls, but could they actually learn to say the word Nevermore? Hear what John and Shannon have to say when they discuss ravens with Amanda and I. Okay, go get your binoculars and let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. So continuing with our Halloween theme for this month, we're going to talk about the raven today. So I don't know a lot about ravens aside from kind of creepy folklore and what Edgar Allan Poe has told us. So we're excited to learn more.
Nevermore.
Nevermore. So one question kind of off the bat, are ravens and crows, are they one and the same? Is it a type of crow? I know that they're highly intelligent animals, both ravens and crows, but what's kind of the difference between a raven and a crow?
Well, they're not each other's. They're not nested within each other or anything like that.
They're
They're
not.
Separate. Ravens are big versions of crows, but they're not the same species or anything.
Really? Okay.
Anything like that. Ravens are kind of almost the song of my childhood, because sometimes I think there were more ravens than crows where I was growing up, and I don't find them spooky.
No.
Oh.
No. You think it's because they're black? Is that why people like black cats, that people find them spooky?
I think so. I think it might just be like kind of the way you're raised. Other people tell you it's creepy. Maybe if you're exposed to them more, like, because from where you're from, Shannon, you saw them all the time.
They call it a murder of crows. So that is spooky and creepy in and of itself, I suppose. I don't know.
What's a group of ravens? Yeah.
A group of ravens.
Okay.
I don't know.
It's not like homicide or...
I mean, I guess, whatever
team.
I think is not relevant, because they are symbols in a lot of cultures of death. And so that they have that power.
Right.
So they're part of this very large family called the Corvidae, and it's a really successful family, and meaning they are on islands all over the world. Ravens themselves, common raven, the one we're talking about, is a very temperate bird, north temperate. So they're found up at higher latitudes, and they go all the way up to basically the Bering Sea in Alaska, as far north as you can get. And so I like to think of them for how successful they are. They have a huge range, and they're all over the old world too. And it's the same species.
Well,
depending on your taxonomy, they're genetically distinct. And but they're also considered to be, this group of birds is considered to be the smartest group of birds that we know of. And that's because they've been brought into captivity and shown that they can solve all kinds of complex puzzles that other birds can't. And so they're incredibly interesting birds in that sense. And I think that could be a little spooky. I mean, and they're more than willing to do things like, I mean, they're kind of scavengers and opportunistic birds, so they'll
you'll find them on the side of the road, sticking their head inside of something dead.
Yeah, they'll go after other birds' nestlings if the nest is unattended.
You don't turn your back on a crow or raven if you're a breeding bird, because they're very good at what they do. They have huge vocal repertoires. They can mimic. There's a study that just was published looking at brain size and complexity of vocalizations, and it turns out that ravens do, they have large brains for their body size. Even if you correct for relationships, they do. So this behavioral flexibility, they can do things that we only thought humans could do. They can not just problem solve, but they can store items and use them later. They see something, it has a use in their mind it has a use, but they're not going to use it right away, and it's not food. But they might barter with it or trade with another bird with some kind of trinket.
Wow.
They pick up weird colored things. Goes across the family. They're very curious, like intensely curious, which is probably one of the reasons why their brains are so large. And you should not be afraid of being called a bird brain. I always tell people this now because corvids have the same density of neurons as higher primates. So these things can do things that chimps and orangutans can do. Wow. Not just, and that's, they recognize themselves, they recognize others. They can do all kinds of really complex behaviors, which makes them completely fascinating.
And can they use tools as well?
They do.
They figured out that's something that's unique to, ravens, right?
I mean not entirely, but I think as Shannon's describing,
Darwin's finches use tools too.
The mentality in how they're using them, I think, is at a different level compared to what Darwin's finches would do.
Yeah, they have a plan.
Okay.
If you give them things and a puzzle they've never seen, they'll figure it out.
Wow.
You don't have to demonstrate it for them. They'll figure out how to pull out sticks and get the food that comes out. And they don't even have to have a reward. The challenge of just doing things is enough for these birds. Wow. They play. There's hilarious videos of them purposefully sliding down snowbanks and sliding down roofs, and it's really clear, even though I'm anthropomorphizing a lot, it's really clear that they're playing. And the scientists who have studied them say that that's indeed what they're doing. So there's a large part of play that is why they can problem solve. That's what kids do. They play. They experience their world through that play. And they get more sophisticated as they get older because they have experiences in that play world. Wow. And so crows and ravens are really unbelievable. You should be awed by them, not afraid of them. Even if they are called murders.
So I wanted to go back. I want to steal a question that RJ brought up on the train down here. So going back to what you were saying about Shannon about their vocalizations, and we were wondering, could a raven actually say Nevermore?
I wonder if one has ever been taught to do that. That's kind of...
If I had to bet, I would bet yes.
But wow, good question.
Because they mimic a lot of other things. They have huge repertoires of vocalizations.
Which is funny because they
might not use them in most of their real life.
In real life, they don't use them particularly. Okay. That's not, every once in a while you hear kind of some gurgling stuff, but.
Yeah, I wouldn't put anything past a raven.
Wow.
So when they're mimicking other bird calls, are they just doing it for their own, like it's a puzzle, like they're trying to mimic something, or are they doing it to impersonate them, or how?
So mimicry is an interesting thing because there are lots of different birds that mimic, and once again, I would say that with crows, I don't think them doing it for any purpose other than the fact that they can, and like they have the capacity. They figured out the capacity to do it. So it's almost like sliding down a snowbank, in the sense that they've got the mental capacity to do it. They're definitely beyond a lot of other birds in terms of that mental capacity, which is one of the reasons why it makes them so interesting. One thing I wanted to point out is that here in the Midwest in Chicago, you've got to go up to northern central Minnesota, northern Wisconsin to actually get into the range of common ravens. Oh. So in the west, they come all the way down into Arizona through the Rocky Mountains up in the high elevations. And in the east, they're in the Appalachians, and their numbers have varied quite a bit. But one of the interesting things in both those southern parts of those mountainous areas on either side of the country is that they've also started to come down into lower elevations and even move into urban areas. And, that's something that's happened in the last 20, 25 years or so. And so it's interesting that even as smart as these birds are, they clearly have had a lot of trepidation about being around humans to a large extent in the past.
Well, that might be smart.
That's true.
Might be.
Yeah. Yeah, ravens are pretty amazing. Did you guys see pictures of them anting?
No.
So they, and crows do this too, they'll stand by an anthill and let ants crawl on their feathers. And, there's lots of reasons why people think that might happen, but it might be because the things that the ants spew out, the formic acid, things like that, keep other things away from them. So that they don't get bit by as many mosquitoes and other things like that. But there are these really weird pictures of them having ants crawl over their body. They might snap the ant and rub the ant bodies on them, which is clearly them trying to put chemicals onto their feathers. So maybe that keeps mites away or other things that you don't want necessarily crawling all over you.
Wow.
But the idea of going and standing by an anthill and letting those things crawl all over you, but there are, because they're black, so the images are really so ravens are creepy.
Shannon comes
Shannon's
around.
convinced.
She's come around.
They're also kind of amazing from a standpoint of their ability to live in really inhospitable areas. So I remember as a kid, the Audubon Society used to publish this Christmas bird count summary of all the Christmas bird counts. And one of the ones I would always look up because it would always be interesting was one at the far northern tip of Alaska in Point Barrow. And they would go out there and they have like a couple hours. It's dark there in the winter. And so there's not much you can do, but they would go out and have, 6 hours by snowmobile or something. And the only birds they would see would be a couple of ravens. No. And so, here's this, they're capable of living in a lot of different places.
Wow. And they're very long-lived, too, for a songbird. I think I read in captivity the oldest one they know of was 69 years old.
Oh, my
God.
gosh.
That's super old.
Yeah.
Parrot kind of old.
Wow.
I doubt that that's all that common, but they are a lot more long-lived than you might think some songbirds are. So they're also in the same part of the tree of life for birds as birds of paradise are. And even though crows are really cool, they did not, branch out into the land of unbelievable feathers or anything like that. But their brains are really special.
So when you say that, I think crows and magpies and some of the jays and stuff are pretty cool in the Corvidae.
But not ravens themselves. I mean, there's
that's
white
true.
and
Ravens
gray
are just
on them, and that's in black.
And
that's about it.
there's an interesting thing too. It's like, what's the benefit of being an all-black bird like that?
Yeah, if you live in a hot desert too.
Yeah.
Why? That's not such a good thing.
Yeah, it's to creep people out.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Does anything prey on crows? Like, I'm wondering, is there some advantage there?
Yeah, West Nile virus preys on crows.
So ravens are big enough that I don't think they get preyed upon. But when you said that, what I was thinking about is an old article I remember reading where crows will mob things, and ravens would do some of this too. And they were mobbed. The person was watching them mob a great horned owl, and most of the time that drives a great horned owl off. And in this particular case, the great horned owl reached out and grabbed one of the crows and killed it. And I mean, that shut up everybody else. and so, you can imagine,
I mean, they can, their vocalizations, they can deceive birds. They can make alarm calls that are not because of an alarm, but maybe that's part of play behavior too, right? The way little kids will learn how to lie, and it's a sign of brain development when they can do that.
Yeah.
Also super creepy.
Yeah.
I guess we are coming in on the creepy side, but I feel like they're considered mystical animals by a lot of Native American tribes, and I think that's kind of well earned by sort of, I guess you could call it the spookiness, but just kind of the otherworldly aspect of their calls and things like that. And so,
yeah, how smart they are. They follow people. If they think you're doing something that's benefit them, they'll follow you.
Oh, how creepy.
So,
doing what a raven does.
That's right, because they're smart and their brains are really evolved.
Should we get into a mailbag question?
Sure.
Okay. This is funny because, Shannon, you talked about bird brains earlier in this episode, and this person is talking about bird brains as well. So this is from Poppy from Louisville, Kentucky. And she says, in one of your episodes, Shannon talked about how the term bird brain should be a compliment because birds are so smart. This is very in tune with our episode. Can you go into more detail on how smart birds are? Also, I think bird brain would be a great name for fans of the podcast. What do you think?
Good call.
I will view that as a compliment because that's what I tell everybody. So if you look at one of the ways you can measure brain capacity is by looking at the density of neurons per given space. Okay. And crows and ravens, corvids in general, have a much higher number of neurons per given space than other birds do. And in this case, it approaches what you see in chimpanzees and other higher primates. And so that is a lot of brain capacity trapped in a very small space. And so birds aren't dumb. Where did that bird brain thing come from? Not from people who spent
chickens.
time... Well, that could be true. Not from people who spend time around crows or ravens. That's
probably
going to
elicit some responses.
Uh-oh.
I don't know. I should have looked that up. The whole where did bird brain come from?
I'm always reminded by a short piece in a nature documentary where they were showing how good members of the Corvidae were at solving various puzzles, and they got to the end and they had a common raven, and they said, let's compare what the common raven can do to some other animals, and they pulled out these two standard poodles and
who are thought to be smart, right? Poodles are thought to be really smart,
and they did what we've been talking about, which they showed the raven how to do a puzzle, and they pulled the same puzzle out and they showed the dogs how to do it. And it was a completely unfair thing because the raven, of course, 30 seconds later had gone through and redone this puzzle and gotten whatever the reward was. And the dogs just sat there and looked at it. But I loved it because it kind of highlighted, like, dogs are definitely not that smart when it comes down to things, and they're not necessarily problem solvers in most situations.
Oh, yeah, there's some hate mail right there.
Yeah, no, I know.
I mean, it has to do with the fact that humans have messed with the dogs, right? So these breeds of dogs are bred for particular things.
I'm not saying coyotes could do any better in those puzzles.
They'd be scarier.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. So it's really hard because humans don't want that from you. You don't want your dog. That's why they're freaked out about cats because, you want a dog to be loyal. So it's very good at the things, or it might be very good at hunting or finding ducks or something like that. I'm just going to point out
a cat would not solve that puzzle either.
Yeah, the cat would just destroy the puzzle and say whatever.
And eat the raven.
And eat the raven.
Yeah, Early's tried to.
Yeah. That's pretty funny. So.
All right. So our listeners, bird brains, yes or no?
I like that idea.
Yeah. I think it's funny.
I'm all for it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to call it then. John, do you want to close it out?
Yeah. We need more bird brains.
Yeah. Let's get some bird brains. Thanks everyone for listening. Real quick, I just wanted to end the show talking about one of my favorite raven scenes in movies and TV. There's an episode of Sopranos, I'm sure we've got some Sopranos fans out there, where Christopher is being initiated into the mob. During initiation, he looks out the window and he sees a raven looking into the window right as he's getting his finger pricked. It's such a funny scene, and he's such a head case. And then after that, Who has a more tragic story arc than Christopher? And does seeing the Raven allow him to be more self-destructive? It gives him an excuse to go off the rails? Or does seeing the Raven actually curse him? It's so well written. We love that show. Had to mention this on our Raven episode. If Michael Imperioli, David Chase, or Stephen Van Zandt ever want to talk birds with us, we'd be thrilled. Okay, happy Halloween, everyone. See you next time, bird brains.